On December 13, 1937, just 2 years before Hitler's invasion of Poland, a horrific event unfolded in Asia, an atrocity that many historians believe marks the true beginning of World War II. Japanese forces captured the Chinese capital of Nanjing, and what followed was nothing short of a nightmare. Over 6 weeks, Japanese soldiers brutalized the city's civilians and prisoners, killing between 200,000 to 300,000 people. Mass executions, rampant sexual violence, and unspeakable horrors were carried out in plain sight. This was only the beginning of a series of atrocities that would scar history forever. The Nanjing Massacre, often overshadowed by other major battles of World War II, marks a chilling moment in history. On December 13, 1937, Japanese forces captured the Chinese capital of Nanjing after weeks of fierce fighting. What followed was a period of widespread violence and destruction. Tens of thousands of civilians were killed, and many more were forced to endure harsh conditions. Buildings were destroyed, and entire neighborhoods were left in ruins. The city's population was subjected to violence and intimidation, and the Japanese forces took control with an iron grip. During this time, many Chinese soldiers who had surrendered were executed, and a significant number of civilians were displaced. Despite early reports of the violence, the global response was slow, and many countries initially dismissed the situation as exaggerated propaganda. However, the scale of the tragedy soon became undeniable. As the Nanjing Massacre unfolded, it became clear that this was no ordinary military conquest. The Japanese army's approach was one of total domination, leaving a lasting impact on the region. While many focus on the immediate destruction of the city, the long-term consequences were equally devastating. Over the following weeks, many survivors were left to cope with the aftermath of the violence. Thousands of families were displaced, seeking refuge in shelters or attempting to flee the city. Among those who stayed behind was a group of foreign nationals, including John Ray, a German businessman, who established a safety zone. This zone became a lifeline for nearly 200,000 Chinese civilians. Despite the protection it offered, those within the zone still faced constant threats from Japanese soldiers, who frequently raided the area. In a rare act of defiance, some foreigners, including missionaries like Minnie Vatran, documented the atrocities with photographs and diaries, risking their lives to expose the truth. At the same time, Japan's leadership worked to suppress the story, dismissing the accounts as exaggerations or propaganda. The global community remained largely silent, with many questioning the validity of the reports. The struggle to get the truth out would continue long after the events in Nanjing had ended. In the aftermath of the Nanjing Massacre, the world's response was deeply divided. Despite the overwhelming evidence of atrocities, many governments were hesitant to take strong action against Japan. The Japanese military worked hard to cover up the extent of the violence, downplaying the events as isolated incidents or fabrications. For years, international press coverage was minimal, and the full scale of the massacre wasn't widely acknowledged. However, the accounts from those who had witnessed the horrors, such as foreign nationals like John Ray and missionary Minnie Vatran, proved invaluable in shedding light on the truth. These brave individuals risked their own safety to document the killings, taking photos and writing detailed diaries that were smuggled out of the city. Their testimonies became some of the earliest proof of the magnitude of the massacre. Still, it wasn't until after the war that the full scope of the event began to unfold. The post-war trials in Tokyo, which addressed Japan's wartime crimes, took some action against individual perpetrators. Commander Iwon Matsui was convicted for his failure to prevent the atrocities and executed in 1948. Yet, many of those responsible were never brought to justice. Some high-ranking officials in Japan continued to deny the events, while others remained silent. The legacy of the Nanjing Massacre would live on in the strained diplomatic relations between Japan and China, with both sides continuing to grapple with the truth of what happened. The silence surrounding the Nanjing Massacre continued for decades, even as China sought to bring international attention to the atrocities. The lack of accountability for the perpetrators and the reluctance of the Japanese government to fully acknowledge the extent of the massacre created a tense atmosphere in the years following World War II. For many in China, the memory of Nanjing remained a painful and unresolved chapter, one that was often overlooked or downplayed in global discussions of the war. During the Cold War, geopolitical considerations further complicated the narrative. The United States, as part of its strategic alliance with Japan, was reluctant to push too hard for Japanese war crimes to be fully addressed. In fact, many of the soldiers who committed the atrocities in Nanjing were never tried or held accountable, with some even being granted immunity by the US in exchange for their knowledge on biological warfare. This decision was made in the interest of securing intelligence during the early stages of the Cold War, leaving many to question the moral implications of such compromises. Meanwhile, in Japan, the narrative around the massacre remained controversial. Some right-wing officials, including influential figures in Japan's political circles, continued to downplay or deny the events ever took place. Textbooks in Japan presented the Nanjing massacre in a light that suggested it was exaggerated or fabricated, further fueling tensions with China. The issue became a major diplomatic sticking point, as China demanded a formal apology and acknowledgement of the suffering inflicted on its people. Despite this, efforts by activists, historians, and survivors to preserve the truth continued. It wasn't until the 1990s, when the Japanese government issued its first official apology for the massacre, that any real acknowledgement took place, though not without its critics. Despite the official apology from Japan in the 1990s, the Nanjing massacre remains a deeply contentious issue. In the years following the apology, Japan's leaders continued to face criticism, both at home and abroad, for their handling of the event. While some Japanese politicians and citizens recognized the massacre as a historical truth, others, particularly from the political right, attempted to downplay its significance or deny the scale of the atrocities. These attempts to whitewash history sparked outrage in China and other countries that had suffered under Japanese occupation. For China, the Nanjing massacre represents more than just a tragic event from the past. It is a symbol of the long-standing wounds inflicted by Japanese aggression. The Chinese government has made efforts to keep the memory of Nanjing alive, using it as a reminder of the brutality of war and the need for peace. Monuments have been erected, and annual memorial services continue to be held in honor of the victims. However, the ongoing diplomatic tension between Japan and China shows that the wounds of Nanjing have not fully healed. Some Japanese officials have been criticized for making revisionist statements that challenge the established historical account of the massacre. For many in China, these statements are seen as a betrayal of the suffering that took place in 1937. Yet, despite the ongoing disputes, the truth of what happened in Nanjing cannot be denied. The legacy of the massacre remains a powerful reminder of the devastating cost of war and the need for historical accountability.